Join us to talk writing, creative expression, and community collaboration as trans and gender diverse authors and editors from the recently released anthology Flux. Trans and gender diverse reflections and imaginings, Thousand Thread Press read and reflect on their work. Trans is a coalitional identity as it aligns different genders under one thumb. I will lead a conversation about how Tiff's, Madison's, and Nick's different lived experiences intersect with their transness and how their self-representation and influence by context of collective storytelling. Flux was released alongside trans and gender diverse community anthology We Twinkle Like Gold, Thousand Threads Press last December, and follow Hot on Heels of Australia's first mainstream collection of trans and gender diverse writing, Nothing to Hide, Voices of Trans and Gender Diverse Australia. That's my book. Together, these three books showcase the work of over 80 authors, signaling increasing mainstream interest in trans and gender diverse lives, as well as highlighting the collaboration, experimentation, and activism we still need to order to survive and thrive. Both in Flux, trans and gender diverse reflections and imaginings, and We Twinkle Like Gold grew out of Melbourne-based writing workshops and are published by local trans, gender, queer publisher, Thousand Threads Press. Before I introduce my panelists, we would like to acknowledge that this event and all the work that we undertake as a crew happens on a stolen land. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodian of this land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We also would like to extend our respect to our trans elders, past and present. Sitting next to me is Tiff here. Tiff is a multilingual chef, activist, storyteller, and a trans asylum seeker living and working in Nam. And next to Tiff is Madison Moffat. Is a trans woman based in Nam. She is currently a transgender 25-year career in guiding organizations on operating with integrity. Her relation of guilt with her writing pen is occasionally overcome, including having written stage plays and theatrical review. She is currently transgender Victoria board member and consumer advisor to Monash Gender Clinic. Nick Lawson is a fiercely unapologetic, intersectional humanitarian, world builder, and storyteller living on a water-roam land. I hope I pronounced that right. All right, let's get on it. We'll start with 3 short readings of excerpts from the pieces in Flux. Can we start with Tiff, please?
Hello, yeah, that's me. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Tiff. I was supposed to be born as a boy, and at age 4 and 5 is like to wear a skirt. No matter how my mom forced me, I would wear one. I made noise and cry. I am one of 5 siblings, 3 brothers, and 1 sister and me. I don't have the right and freedom to talk about LGBTIQ in my hometown, Malaysia, because it's mostly days and I wanted to have a secure life like other LGBTIQ plus, to have a community and people around to support trans people no matter where they come from. When I was a little kid, at that time, I was unable to share my feelings and my problem with family and friends because I didn't want to make them afraid and stressed by my gender diversity. I just kept it for myself for almost 30 years, small and more. After I came to Australia, only to be able to talk and share my story openly. with a friend and community. Thank you.
Okay, pass it to Madison, please.
Thank you. So the first thing I'll read is an extract from my solo piece called Ethereal Release from Form. I was only 22 when Christine, my wife-to-be, and I first lived together. We were in dire poverty, but desperately in love. I was to start a matriculation course after the Christmas break. Sitting tight in the interim, our mutually excited biochemistry helped us while away the time. That, and flicking through my collection of The Face. We shared an admiration for Lee Bowery, Steve Strange, and Martin Degville, as well as Jean-Paul Gaultier's Skirts and Kilts for Men, and Kurt Cobain's occasional dress. In the Queensland summer heat, I'd taken to wearing beach towels around my waist. Then, when it got too hot, her sarongs. She gently suggested to me, if you want to wear a skirt or dress, I won't mind. I will love you no matter what. Trepidation arrested my body, my tone self-protective. I wouldn't do that. Startled, she asked, why ever not? Respiration halted, and a spraining sensation up my spine, I reeled, because I'm a man. We were young, but there was genuine depth to our mutual intimacy and understanding. My response was absurdly disingenuous, utterly incongruous with every other way I behaved with her. Her invitation was out of love and care, but she could now see the fundamental distress it was bearing. It was clear that any persistence would have been cruel. For so long, I would only permit my most inert exploration of my gender. There was safety in being a passive observer, either of self or increasingly of my heroes. Only with the box lid closed. Every other way had resulted in loss or the threat of it. So would acting on her suggestion. I was certain of it. My appreciation of queer culture must be at a distance. I was to be a normal, happily married man, no longer a confused loser who could never find their place, who could never get it right, a source of worry to the family. It was sweet of Christine to think that I could be loved for who I am, but she was wrong. I would be shown the door.
Thank you, Madison.
Hello, I'm going to read some of my story from Home. That's called Home, sorry. Do we cease to exist if we are not seen, if we are not heard? Are we nothing more than what is seen on the outside? We exist outside of our physical forms and reside between the lines pulled out for us. Each time you read our words, we exist within you, within these pages, and you feel our presence in the world in which you reside. We are immortal beings living forever outside the narrative, carefully constructed for us by mere mortals.
Thank you, Nick. Let's stick with Nick. Can you tell us a bit about the story that came about? What is it about these events or themes that feel important all through? Okay, sure. I want you to tell us a bit about how the story came about. I mean, how did you get this inspiration to write your piece here in this book? Yeah.
That piece that I just read was actually inspired in the creative process of editing the book, and came from, inspired by one of the other writers who in the book, Sadie James, actually. I was trying to figure out how we should order the book, put all the stories in which order, and I couldn't figure that out, so I started writing responses to some of the stories that were in the book to try and help me, and we ended up in Home.
And Madison, same question for you.
So an integral part of my transition was to try to look back, firstly, look back at my life. Firstly, the idea was to identify certain times that were highly traumatic for me and reconcile them, resolve them for myself. But what it turned into an exercise of actually realising that, contrary to what I told myself for so long, throughout my life there'd been this continuity, this transness that was always a part of my life, and so that it became a bit of a history, a personal history of that transness, and the other thing that kept popping up, which isn't really in the excerpt that I read, but much of it keeps making pop cultural references, particularly to pop music and how it's savoury, so to speak. And that kept popping up as a common theme as well, how pop culture, particularly pop songs, kind of made me firstly overcome the trauma, and then later helped me discover, in a rather abrupt way, who I actually was.
If you can think of that one song, what would it be?
So I'd say, can I say two? I'll be
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So the first one is Anyone Who Had a Heart by Dionne Warwick, which I used to listen to as a small child again and again in a little box. So you might have heard a bit about, the box lid closed. And I would imagine myself as a sort of Dionne, Dusty Springfield, kind of like that voice was my voice, as the little person in the box. The second one is a song called Secrets by Lapai, and that's particularly so because I was sitting in a hotel room and doing work and sort of saw this film clip, and it was of the performer walking through Newtown sort of listlessly, and I really, when I was a young adult, I used to walk through those very same streets in Newtown, something bothering me. And in the book I sort of mention that. It's like, I describe it as a thought of, what can it even mean for my body not to be mine? And here I am seeing this woman walking through the streets of Newtown, and I just sort of made that connection.
Yeah. If I could pick a song, it would I Am What I Am, because a lot of the drag queens back in Singapore, they perform that song so much, and it was like, oh, this is relatable, and then they make it their own, they strip down, and just be them. I am what I am. So I could relate to your story here. All right, Tiff, same question. Yeah, what is about this event? I mean, anything feel important or true, like how your story come about that inspired you to write this piece?
Yeah, actually this
your lived experience.
My this has happened. Actually this story come out when me and Alex went to direct like 3 person. We have a meeting in the cafe in the counter. They just want to. I supposed to make a documentary, so like I sharing my
like a doco, like film.
Yeah, film.
Oh wow!
That's how we're gonna do next. I want to do documentary.
It's famous.
Now that's on the way the process because directs filmmaker.
Okay.
So that's why they write it's like filmmaker. So it's ongoing, but I'm still ongoing. That's why three people on the counter talking about one person question and then one person recording and I answer. And that's come to my mind that it stayed with me a lot of time to explain for sitting like 3-4 hours. And so the question they throw for me is really emotional, and I have to. That's why it's really that it's just it's a real story and release my emotional, and because it's a true story and my experiences sign is for when you want to remember, take back to your age, the childhood is very emotional, very tough feeling. It's because it's really sometimes can be very hard to explain because of myself. That's why I want to come out to do more, like to share and tell people. Because Malaysia is different than Australia, but we'll talk more about this later.
Actually, I can relate to your story because, you know, I don't think I'll be thinking and to tell story about my past because I already embraced that when I came to Australia. Because yeah, I don't want to think about my past. But writing a book, I guess, you know, you have to relive your past, and you get into emotional. But I guess we're adult now; we can handle our emotions a bit better now. Yeah. So
I know people in my book that feel sad about it, so that I don't them being strong, being inspiring.
Yeah, I guess you just want to raise awareness.
My friends,
yeah.
I read your story, I'm crying. I said, what?
Oh, did you cry on my story? Oh,
no,
your story.
friends,
Okay.
They read my story, I'm crying. They said, I cannot cry.
All right, okay, let's move on before you cry. So our theme is intersectionality, which is the word that gets thrown around a lot. So what do we mean by intersectionality? Who do you want to answer first? Okay. Yeah, what do we mean by intersectionality? I mean, for you, yourself.
For myself?
Yes.
No, I can't answer for these. But for myself, I'm disabled and I'm neurodivergent and I'm trans, and so my physical disability is from a rare genetic connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And that it creates a lot of fatigue and pain and cognitive issues coupled with ADHD and autism. And I didn't know that I had any of these issues growing up, so it was very hard. But also, I was the tomboy kid that everyone just knew as the tomboy kid. And everyone called me Nick, of course, unless I was in trouble for something, which was quite often. But yeah, growing up it was really difficult because most people just thought I was being an annoying, hyperactive child, whereas I was struggling really and having to hide that. Growing up in a small town, having to hide that, you know, that I had the gender differences and sexuality differences was also really struggling for me as well. So you can't really take one away from the other. They're all sort of intersect. So that's what I think we mean by intersectionality. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm trans, I'm bi, I started in an environment of poverty, working class, although I kind of sort of joke. It's actually some truth to the joke when I say I came from the criminal classes. So that kind of poverty, where you're scratching and sometimes stealing from others just to get by. I have psychosocial disability, which is considered severe enough for me to get funding for assistance. But I'm also somehow now, I joke that I'm a bougie bitch because I've kind of gentrified. So it's funny. I mean, for me, you know, intersectionality is about. I spend a lot of my time these days, because this is the nature of transition, thinking about what it means for me to be trans. But no trans experience is the same. And I think one of the key things that makes trans experience distinct, amongst other things, is intersection. A bi trans person will not have, who comes from poverty, will not have the same experience as a trans person who came from privilege, who on the other hand, you know, is asexual, for instance.
Yeah.
So I think that while I try to think that none of this actually determines your destiny, it certainly does shape the challenges of your subsequent life.
Thank you, Madison. You ready to answer?
Yes, my one actually long, I will make sure. When I did the age 5 years old, because that time my uncle and auntie, they always call me tomboy, but they never call my name. And they like to call me tomboy because they know that I act like a boy, but actually they don't know that I'm a girl. Yeah. So they always like to thank me because my mom have a Asian grocery shop in the small village shop. People around my hometown village, they know that I am a girl, but I wear like a tomboy because I don't like to wear skirts. So sometimes I feel it's hard for me because they don't understand, and I don't have the freedom to share with anyone because that's the thing is I just keep it myself. But I have to protect my family and myself, and because little kid you don't have much money, you have to mention to your parents, and also I like to play with my brother. Like he's 8 years old, I was naked to wear the t-shirt, and I went fishing with my sibling, my brother, and so my brother tried to look after me when I went out because they know I'm still there. They always say I more like to play with the man than a girl. So, and also my mom, every time my mom wants to go to the shop, I have to accompany my mother to go to the shop, and people see me, how come your girls always wear boy pants and never wear skirt? So my mom, I think my mom has answered that. I can't remember. Maybe say she loved to wear boy pants all the time. Then she said that's nature. My mother said like that.
Okay.
Again, thank you.
Thank you. If I can add on to that question, and with myself, I think it was growing up, being trans and being Muslim. It was difficult, especially coming from a Muslim family. So it was hard. So I didn't think that I could be Muslim and trans at the same time until I actually moved here, and I met a lot of queer Muslims here, and I said, oh, I can be trans and Muslim. So that would be my story into this question. But yeah. Okay, let's move on. Too often, the stories of minorities get read as texts of their life, as though we can be collapsed into a single narrative of mainstream consumption. Your stories all reference an autobiography, but they play with form in a way that denies an absolute identity between the I of the story and the person we see in front of us tonight. In what way is the I of your story different from the I of who you are, Madison? Oh, okay, Nick, let's go with me. Yeah, you have the microphone already.
I think that the I in the story is actually quite ambiguous, because doesn't speak about how, like, previous lived experiences or how that impacts the relationship with the world around them, the other people, and the relationship between themselves as well. Whereas, less ambiguous, I suppose. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, Madison?
So,
sorry, your mic's not working.
Is it? Oh, yes, it's off.
hello.
1, 2,
Yeah.
there we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, in the extract, like aerial release reform, I'm looking back. So it's me, post-transition, looking back at me pre-transition. So something that the whole reason why I had to perform that writing task was because I didn't want to go there. So a key difference really between the I in the narrative and me in real life is that you know, I basically don't want to dwell on that past. And yet that is exactly what I'm doing in that entire exit. But, you know, that's the exercise.
Yeah. Safe question too. In what way is the I of your story different from the I of who you are?
I can be real me here. I can be real and compare in my country, Malaysia. In my country, I can have to.
You mean you can be yourself?
Can be
yeah.
myself, yeah. I can be who I want to be. And people not judge me. In my country,
You have to live. Yeah.
Very uncomfortable living in Malaysia.
Like with me in Singapore, I have to be a cis female. I can't tell people that I was trans because you have to be possible. If not, your own peers are going to make fun of you. So until I came here, it was like, I can be who you are. You can be whatever you want. You can wear whatever you want, and there's no discrimination here.
I find out my relatives make fun of me more than friends, but friends relatives they always make fun of me.
Yeah.
That is make me so sad.
Of course.
That's why
something they don't realize of the words that they actually use and hurt you.
They don't know.
Yeah, because there's not much awareness, and sometimes.
But
technology.
Yeah, because I don't learn because it's a tradition culture.
It is, but we need to educate them. Like I'm educating my mom.
I hope one day I can educate my parents, but it's not now. It's not now.
Of course. Yeah, thank you. Let's go a bit deeper, Nick. Love and Other Things speaks in the voice of the love lyric. The I and you are in a private space, emptied of the social. But the piece finishes with a we in the voice of manifesto. Can you talk about those movements and different voices? How they connect to different experiences of your position?
In the story, it's an ongoing relating between two people who grew up in similar life circumstances and found solace in each other, and the inescapable horrors of the world around them. It turns into we in the end, me, the I and the you. Yeah. At the start of the story, they came together after being separated by various factors. The we in the end, it's a promise to each other that together they'll fight the demons that are there in the world, grow to become better people and to help others. They were separated through various factors in life, but they still loved each other, and they needed to work on themselves and in order to be able to have a healthy relationship with each other. It's not really true to my love life, but growing up in a difficult circumstances, I did like to daydream and romanticise things. So I think in that respect it is a little bit like me. So it's sort of, the way I romanticise things and then get disappointed when it's not like that. And then my life's not really that much of a fairy tale. But, we can dream, I suppose.
Of course, yeah. We are allowed to dream. I'm pretty sure we dreamed a lot when we were a lot younger, right? I have a lot of dreams, but it doesn't mean it came true. All right, Madison, could you talk a bit about the differences of similarities between the I in the ethereal release from form and trans rage?
Sure.
So what I'll do is I'll also first just read a small passage from Trans Rage.
Yeah.
So I'm really being asked to compare what I read to this. The other is truly other, but we can still understand each other through knowing what we jointly will never stand by. Anger serves to ward off the vanguards of nice, who willfully or unwittingly perpetuate and sanction impositions that are not aimed their way. Anyone can be nice. It is kindness that takes effort. Burning frustration, even terror, can be shared with mutually kind others, and this can collectively call upon us to gather and declare our care and concern. The opposite of anger is not love, it is indifference. I am angry primarily because I am invested. Mutually emoted anger is an investment in each other. The severely marginalised can still defy encompassing and contiguous apathy. I matter, and I refuse to abide by X. I will justly retaliate if necessary. So I feel like I should have gotten up and behaved like some kind of evangelical as I was reading it. So the difference there is like in Ethereal Release from Form, it's a story, of this working class kid who's queer, and as things progress, I'm allowing myself a certain amount of joy in terms of gender play, and that I start, suppressing that over time to a point where as an adult, I'm, pre-transition adult, I've almost completely suppressed this stuff. And I am living my life, particularly at work, in what I like to call corporate man, And I lived a lot of my life outside of work as if I was corporate man as well, So that was the I in Ethereal Release from Form. Whereas in Trans Rage, it's all past that. It's post-transition, and it's quite aspirational. I'm declaring how I wish to be. And I'm doing so after having, to a certain extent, crossed the divide between being part of the working class or the proletariat, I'm getting all political now, and the bourgeoisie. My work now, I'm ashamed to say sometimes, I'm very much part of the bourgeoisie, and everyone around me is. They all drive Beamers and Mercs and all that stuff. What I'm nonetheless asserting is that I now find myself once again marginalised, no longer because I'm poor, but because I'm trans. And what I've actually had to do is just ignore this neoliberal individualist stuff that I'm ashamed to admit, bought into, when I was cisgender and when I was heterosexual, etc. And I've had to realise that community is where it's at. Not the individual striving in a market economy.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Definitely. Then Tiff, can you speak a bit about how this piece is different to your story, to Nothing to Hide? So Tiff has 2 books, by the way. One is in Flux and one is Nothing to Hide. So can you tell us a bit this piece different?
Actually, Nothing to Hide is, I did ask my friend, actually she's from Singapore, actually, this Nothing to Hide got for the first person that, the first people try to write for me. I explain in my own language. I speak 3 languages, English, Chinese, Hokkien, when I share my story to her. And she was stressful as well because it's not easy to write people's story. You have to help. Like, I want to write a story, I have to imagine your life back to age form, like 30, 40 years ago. So she had to imagine take her time, and she told me about this as well. It's not easy. And then we able to make it because she support me, and then that's the first thing that I really appreciate her. And then after that, I got 3 editors, Samuel King and another person as well. On the book, Nothing to Hide, they have named it. And also, not much different, just as 2 different experiences that I have to split into 2. because the nothing to hide story is a little bit longer, and that's why
So that's why you need third
I
book.
story have to be right. If you want to write completely, book have to be whole book, and then that's why the coming book number 3 is coming soon.
Okay.
I have to write too much thing that I want to share. Like, I know everyone have their own story too to share, right? But for me, because I'm too much scar when I little kid until now, there's big scar, so I want to.
But what does this story express about your different position as, you know, as a former daughter back in Malaysia, then the son who cannot return to Malaysia, and in Australian working migrant asylum seeker. So, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good question. First thing I live in Malaysia is I cannot be myself. I don't have that freedom, and I should be myself when I age. Like if my parents allow me to change my gender, maybe 8 years, 10 years old, I already changed the whole body. To be a man, from female to be a man. But at time, because my parents is not support, it's like my mom is very traditional, and my sister as well. You never ever change your body. They control my life, and because they love me, I know they love me and they care about me. Of course, they protect me. But that's why I had to play two parts, two person body. Like, you know, I don't want to make my parents upset and unhappy, because we know a rich family. We come from a very background. Because my mom had to go washing clothes for the people, so I have to think for them. So until age 30 years old, I want to be able, 20 years old, I be able to fly to Singapore, your country, and then the country also like not yet open, very open for the people to change.
It's not legal.
It's not legal. It's not changeable. So I know Australia is going to be legal. Same-sex marriage equality one day. That time I come here, it's not yet legal marriage. So I fly to Australia in 2012. But I don't have a common. I didn't get to know LGBTIQA yet because I don't know anyone here. So slowly my friend explained and get me involved in a thing. It's a long story here, and like one day it's not enough time to say.
I guess.
I want to say this thing like I have to hiding myself for 30 years. I cannot be who I want to be at this age, and because I'm very loyal to my parents, and then after 20, I take my decision, decide to set out from my parents to be myself, and I went to Singapore where I say have my social life, little bit ready until I come to Australia, 2012, and that was that. And then today now I'm being proud to be who I want to be because I'll be able to express my feeling and talking to everyone here.
I guess, you know, at the end of the day, I think all of us here as a trans person, we don't want to disappoint anyone, especially our parents.
Yeah, I don't want to.
Yeah, but we have to live our life. You know, we have to be happy. What makes you happy? Being trans makes me happy. Being a woman makes me happy. Being a man makes me happy.
My mom said if you change it's karma. I don't. She always believe in the karma, right? And I believe that too. But I want to be happy.
It's not a crime. Tell her that.
Yeah, I have to explain.
There's nothing about karma here.
She's a Buddhist, but I didn't argue with her. I let her talk, and then one thing I want to say is when I haven't done my operation, like I asked her permission. I say, Mama, can I do my birthday? And then she starts screaming, crying, and throw the phone like that to tell the pen. She said, change your gender, it's not good for you. And after that, I wait for after 2 years the COVID time, so I to do my surgery. And after a few months I called her and she said, "What happened to your voice?" And I don't, the weather is too hot. Actually, that time is a winter. She said, "Drink more water because my voice, when you have a hormone, when your voice changes." I said, "What happened to your voice?" I said, "No, so the weather is hot." And then she's trust me. I'm not saying I want to lie, but that's how the
But can I ask this question? Has she seen you, like a new photo?
She said my mustache. She said you grow mustache.
Okay.
That's what she can do. She cannot fly here.
No, but what is the reaction of the mustache?
I didn't answer because
she didn't say anything.
She said you got grow mustache.
She said wax it up.
She's starting to little bit can accept.
Okay.
Because when mother on the phone, she can't do anything right. She cannot come and grab me and go home.
I totally can relate to this. It's Asian moms. My mom took 8 years to accept for who I am.
And then one more thing I want to say is, I want to really openly and be myself. Don't have to listen to my relative auntie to criticize about me, to be trans, especially. And don't want to return to you because it's too hard for my family to understand about you. Don't want to make them unhappy. All these are pointed.
Did you actually
at the
read
moment
the whole book already? We want people to buy the book. So, but yeah, I can totally relate to you. And Asian moms, yeah, it's a bit hard. I mean,
I think I should bring you one day to my country, and then you advocate. And then we do it. Like, I think it's a good idea because we need to educate this in Malaysia. I know it's impossible, can be possible sometimes. Because I try to talk about this in my country.
Yeah, I want to get back to Madison. Are there any
Before you ask a question, I'll just say that I told my mother that I was trans, and she said, "You are my child, so I will love you no matter what."
Yes.
And that's when I knew I was in trouble.
Yeah.
That's when I knew I was in trouble.
I wish my mom would say that. It took a while. I had to run away from home just to, at the age of 16, I just want to be a woman. So I just ran away from home, and that's when I get my freedom. So.
Sorry, Sasha, that your question?
Yeah, the question is, are there any places where these speak together or come into tension with, what I asked you earlier, with the trans rage?
Okay, so I think the tension is that I'm trying to make my way in ethereal releasement form. I'm trying to make my way with regards to who I am. And I've had all sorts of ideas as to who I was. I'm a goth, I'm a mod, I'm married, and all of this was true in a way. But was that who I am? And it's very similar to, at times I've been asked in therapy, yes, okay, that's great, Madison, or Warwick is what they call me then, that's what you think, but what do you feel? And I normally couldn't answer, just like, I'd be stumped as to who I am. Within the difference between that and trans rage, the last thing that I read is I have some solid idea of who I am. But now it's not about who I am, it's about what on earth I'm going to do about it. Particularly, what am I going to do in response to the reactions that I get from people. Which, I basically just lost, let's face it, I lost a whole lot of white, middle class, male privilege. What am I going to do now? And one answer was to resist.
Yeah. And when you said your mom already accepted who you are, did you have to have a coming out day?
Let me be very clear. My mother said that she had accepted. I read between the lines. There was very little acceptance. As I said, I knew I was in trouble.
Okay,
she said
sorry,
that.
my bad.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, sorry. I thought your mom was very accepting. I was like, oh, that's nice. It's unlike Asian moms.
No. This was a passive-aggressive way of saying that no matter what sort of terrible things I do, even if I do the terrible thing of coming out as trans, she'll still love me. It's almost a threat. It's almost more like a threat.
All right, let's get back to Nick again because I see a lot of love in this question. What is the we of your love and other things. How does it express something shared when trans people are actually not one community? One, we, but diverse communities with differences.
I don't think that I put much thought into it in that respect when I was writing it. But I think that as humans, we all share that, have a soul, and we do exist outside the perceptions of other people. And I think, to touch on what you were saying before about disappointments, people generally have expectations of us, and that's where the disappointment comes in, because we're stuck in the eye of the beholder. So I can look at everyone in this room and pretend that I know something about them the way that you all look, but in reality I have no idea. People are multifaceted and amazing human beings, and yeah, so I don't think that I didn't actually, when I wrote it, as I said, I didn't put that much thought into the we, but thinking back on it, I like to see people for all that they are, rather than just judging. And yeah, I think that with the disappointment, I like to look at my life and say, I don't have any expectations of anybody else or events that are going to happen, because that's where the disappointment comes from. Yeah. And I know for myself, I was a continuous disappointment to everyone because I had so much potential. But yeah, and to my mother, when I came out, or I tried to come out, and she and her friend had an argument halfway through me telling her about what I was trying to tell them, and then my mother said that I should leave the gay stuff to the gays. So I'm like, cool, Mum. Right. Thanks, Mum. So yeah, I just sort of left it at that point. But yeah, I think that the we is not necessarily everyone lumped into one box. So, yeah, because it's just too restricting, and I don't like that myself. So yeah.
Oh, thanks, Nick. Like I discussed with Madison earlier about our generations, like now we can be visible. We used to be invisible in our time, and we have come so far, but yet we have a lot of work to do, definitely. All right, so can you tell us about how it was to work together? Did you guys work together?
Yeah. Yes, it was great actually. I was sort of invited along. I lived down in Geelong, and it was run here in Merri-bek, I believe. I could be wrong. But I wasn't able to travel up to participate in person in the group, so I did it online. And it was really good to be able to, I didn't really have that much of an idea of what would happen, but I found quite a few new friends in amongst it, and found a bit, not really a life path, but more in the direction of life. And it was really great to work with other trans and gender diverse people, because I've worked with cisgender people in the past, and my perspective, they don't have any understanding of my perspective. Sorry, it's been night in Geelong, and now my alarm's going off. Apologies. Yeah, so it's been really good to not have to justify my existence, and being able to just say something and other people go, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
And I really felt like I was accepted.
I can relate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Madison, how was it working together? Did you get to work with everyone in this book?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
Well, I think there were a few contributors that weren't part of the workshop, but I think the majority of the writing was done by people who are part of these workshops that were sort of, I think they were delivered in hybrid from memory, so some people would show up in person at times, and other times were, you know, doing it via Zoom.
Yeah, this is COVID time, isn't it?
Yeah,
the lockdown time.
Even when it wasn't lockdown, you know, we're a pretty responsible community, I think, when it comes to how we respond to COVID. You know, so we were still Zooming it.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, I mean, for me, it's one of those opportunities, very much touching on what Nick said, to be part of community. I think that for me also, that writing can be a very lonely hobby. Yeah. But being part of a group of, particularly of like-minded writers, you can bounce off them, you know, the ideas that you have, and it kind of can give you also a sense that maybe not only are you not alone, but that what you're writing might even have a chance of resonating with others.
Yeah.
You know, and where it doesn't, because you've just written things far too complicated and esoteric, which I often do, you get that feedback too, which is just as great.
Yeah. Like with me, with Nothing to Hide book, it was individually. We do it all through online, and there was no workshop whatsoever. I was surprised when I was asked to write my story. I was like, oh, okay, you know. And my partner keeps saying, like, you need to have a book. You have so many stories to tell. And then end up our book site got in touch with me and said, like, I want to hear your story. And you know, it's hard to relive your past because you haven't talked about it. You know, you want to delete that past, and you have to relive again. But I think it's also, it feels really good that you can talk about it and share it with other people, with public, and raising awareness of, you know, your lived experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. Until you have an audience, even if it's just a small audience, it almost doesn't feel like you're a writer. You know, that's kind of the point.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. And Tiff, like, how was it to be working with everyone? Did you go to the workshop as well?
No, because this one is actually happening to be a book, because supposed to be a different kind of
the film. Yeah.
And I come to Alex's house to do this. My writing is not good, but I use the recording to speak up. So it's more easy when you're thinking, and then they recording my voice with the recording, and then they were editing, because a lot of things that I can say. Right? Because speaking is good for me. I can tell A to Z, but writing sometimes I can miss out something. I need someone to write, and my writing is not that good.
So Alex is the one.
Alex and Zula, the one that's come to our house and sharing, talking, the experience that I have. That's really nice to
be able to tell your story. In the writing.
And
definitely.
Powerful.
I mean, like, I didn't think that I'm going to have a book, but now I have been writing of my, maybe a quarter of my journey.
I didn't expect that as well. I think, okay, when should do a book? Because it's good. And then different from Nothing to Hide, because it's like a film made. This is gonna be a film. I try to make out to do a documentary as well.
When is this film coming out?
No, not yet, because direct the one that's it's already recording when I have a surgery. This is in the queue with my doctor, Richard, plastic surgery. He went there, he recording, I do post. But that one, when it's coming out, I will share, but not sure when, because it takes time to do. That's more people that I will get involved to do this.
Okay, thank
you.
So each autobiography traverses different paths through gender, class, race, colonizing and colonized differently disabled histories, so that anthology as a whole articulates the multiplicity of transness. What is like for you as authors and readers to read across these different stories? Oh, push it up, yeah. Push it up, yeah.
It was nice to read across the diverse stories that were told. I get a bit bored reading my own stuff. Listening to myself talk a lot. So it's nice to have the other writers involved in sharing their stories as well, because they're quite vastly different than mine. And there was like Tiff and a few other writers from different countries. So I got to learn a little bit about their culture and the different stuff that happens in their countries as well. And as well, a little bit more about Australian culture, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was great to read them. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Like Madison said, each person has different journeys, so it was really nice to see and even learn about each other. Yeah. Same question, Madison. What is it like for you as authors and readers to read across the different stories?
Yeah, so differences, definitely, as we've already talked about, but also similarities. So even when there were different experiences being written about, you could sort of, you could sense there was commonality between yourself and their experience as well, even if it was just down to the level of we're both human beings. We both relate. And then from there, I think it was just the diversity of the writing, the actual writing itself. I just thought was amazing. You know, this is truly an anthology where, you know, there's stuff that's written as a narrative. My stuff's almost filmic in that regard. You know, there's work in here that is really quite abstract, although still meaningful, conveys meaning really well. There's poetry, you know, there's autobiography, there's fiction, but there is that common thread across all of it, which I just think is, you know, quite beautiful.
Yeah. And Tiff, same question. What is it like for you as authors and readers to read across these different stories? Did you read the whole book? And yes. And what do you think about it?
To understand my family, culture, tradition, and nationality, to understand me, and I want to inspire, to let readers to inspire trans people, and also LGBTIQ, to be able to
raising awareness and I guess for people in Malaysia.
For people in my country, in Malaysia, especially my country is Muslim country. So they can, one day they can be open-minded.
Yeah, of course. I guess in Asia, especially in Malaysia, there's not many awareness, especially when it comes to trans, because it's illegal to be trans in Malaysia. And so having you in a book, people can buy the book and even read your story, and people say, oh, I can relate to this. It's relatable, and you know, and maybe it can inspire people.
Inspire people because it's happened to me, can happen to anyone in Malaysia. Some of my friends work. So I want to protect trans people, LGBTIQ people in Malaysia. So I want to promote, it's like a promote.
You want to be
an activist.
Yes.
To help them, like support them.
You want to be the Superman.
Support the trans people in Malaysia, so they be able to have a better life, happy life. Don't be a suffering, depression. Because I have few friends in Malaysia, they are so it's no protection.
And is there anything that you hope that other readers take away from reading this collection, this book? Like you said, you want to raise awareness.
Yes.
Yeah. So what about the people over here in Australia? What you want? What you want to readers to take away from this with your piece? Or maybe just the whole book?
Just by the book,
Yeah.
they to make them understand, support trans people and protect trans kids and everyone, young old people as a trans people. I want the country to
I think to have a better understanding.
And give us more safe space.
Yeah.
Like build up, like do something for trans people. They can have a better choice as well.
And Madison, same question?
Yeah, what was the question?
There was is there anything that you hope or that
yes.
other readers take away from reading this collection in Flux?
Well, could I answer it in regards to my own?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, definitely.
There was that option.
Yeah, there is an option.
Good. So I've tried to outline in a way that's plain but also sort of conveys the emotion. Long story short, that being trans, and this is part of the exercise that led to it, I think, right? Being trans is not something that happened to me. It was actually who I am, in part. So I think that the number one thing that I'd like my stuff to convey is just that simple message. It didn't, and in writing it, I was telling myself that, this did not happen to me. This is who I am. And just in terms of the collection, I suspect other writers here are the same, because that's what comes across to me when I'm reading.
Yeah. Same question. Is there anything that you hope the other readers take away from reading this collection, or either your piece?
I think in mainstream media, we're often portrayed as very pathologised and a debate, and that we may or may not exist. And I hope that people understand that we are actually people with intricate intersectional lives, fulfilling lives that can only, I hope, can only get better. So, I hope that's a huge takeaway for people.
I think a lot of stories out there is being told by other people. So let us write our own narratives so you can read it from individuals. And the end of the day, all we want to do is you can understand us. And we are no different from other human beings, just that we dress better. do we have time for questions? Alex? Okay, anyone have a question? Yes, if you want to direct to somebody, just, yeah. Come on, I'm pretty sure, yes.
My question, first of all, congratulations for writing your life of the book. My question is, in those times in your day-to-day living where you become fearful, perhaps, or something might intimidate you, or something might scare you to not be who you are. How do you overcome that fear of being who you truly are?
First, we have a couple shot of tequila. All right, anyone wants to answer? Yeah, Madison, go.
So the first answer to that comes to mind is that some of us sometimes don't, and there is a lot of self-harm in our community, and I think that that's important to acknowledge. And a lot of that comes from fear of self, fear of others, fear of the body. And when I say, you know, that also applies to myself. Sometimes I just don't. And it was only last week that I needed escalated assistance. You know, and it was because I didn't feel I could cope with it any longer. So the typical support network was rallied around, and I got through it. When I do overcome it, it's that thing of pride. And there's a certain defiance in being proud of who you are when others would ask you not to be. So there's a bit of defiance there as well. So it was a bit like, you know, that end sentence in that trans rage extract. I matter, and I refuse to abide by X. And in this case, X would be, I refuse to abide by your expectation that I be something other than who I am.
Yeah.
And I will resist if necessary. Oh, so, yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that. When I was a lot younger, I didn't think I want to live anymore because there's no reach out back in Singapore like we have here. So shout out to all the organization here, the career-based organization that we can actually reach out, especially Rainbow Door, Switchboard. So actually those organizations save a lot of trans people. Tiff, you have an answer to that?
I don't feel fear because life is too short. For me, I always don't want to do life anymore. I always say, not say I want to cancel, but always think positive, and life is too short. You gotta be happy and do what makes you happy. Don't think negative. I always take this to remind myself, because you never know what's gonna happen to you in 1 day, in 1 second, you go out. So just be positive and try your best to be happy and make everyone around you be happy.
Yeah.
Be humble, be kindness to everyone. Thank you.
Nick, you have answer to that too?
I think that coping mechanism that I used to use, I'm actually a recovered addict, but I was active for 19 years, from about the age of 12 to 31. And it was a lot of the time in order to, because I grew up in, I was your typical next door bogan that you didn't want to live next door to. The cops were always there. There was a lot of family violence and whatnot. So in a way, it was, drugs and alcohol were a coping mechanism. And I think I'm one of the lucky ones to have survived that. And there is, as Madison said before, that's there's a lot of self-harm in the community, and nowadays I don't get scared by much, except for loud noises, and I'm like a skittish cat sometimes. But I think nowadays, if anything, I would say that the coping mechanism that I use is dissociation, and it's not really the healthiest way to deal with these things, but it is a lot healthier than the former. So, I don't recommend it, but it helps.
Yeah. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? We still have time.
We might. Who is the question? I'm not going to ask a question. I'm just going to say, as a trans person, thank you all for doing your books, because in my time, it was done, cis people coming over and taking our stories and then making them into their own. So everyone needs to hear it from us. So thank you so much. No question.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of in the past, a lot of trans people has been exploited, especially for like documentaries, stories on books, and they benefit from us, and we got nothing. I was one of the victims in the past. Yeah.
It's still happening.
It's still happening because, especially with the young ones, they don't know that they're being exploited. They get excited when you come, oh my God, somebody's going to cover a story for me. But, at the end of the day, they get exploited and didn't realize. Yeah, so any more questions?
Thank you. Oh,
You have any question? Okay. Come on, everyone.
I've got many questions. But this last question is, do you think that the transgender category, if you like to put it, do you think that it should have always existed in past civilizations up until now? Or do you think that the transgender category, so to speak, is quite a recent phenomena in the sense of community?
Yeah.
And has religion, sorry, the last question, has religion affected the status, so to speak?
I guess, transgender is not a category. Transgender is a gender. Yeah, so...
I don't mean it as a, sorry,
yes,
I don't mean it
it's
as a category, but...
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not a category.
Yeah.
But society categorises things.
Right.
So that's how I take your question around category. So, and I think there's two sides to this. Transgender people have always existed. This is since the dawn of time stuff.
Yes.
I think what has also existed, not necessarily since the dawn of time, but certainly at least as far back as colonialism, is categorising us.
Yeah.
And I think that what we have ahead of us, possibly, is an opportunity to be realised and accepted and acknowledged as people, rather than, and transgenderism, so to speak, being transgender is an intrinsic part of what some people are. It's not a category for society to place on us. It's not something to place on us in terms of, for instance, psychological sciences, sociological analysis, The idea of being transgender is ours. And it's ours to tell, and it's ours to be.
Yes. If you really, give that clap, that was good. Yeah. I think if you want to learn more about trans history, it's coming out soon this year, and also on ABC on the, I think it's 26th or 28th of February. So it will be from 1920 till today. Yeah. So I guess it's the end, right?
Yeah, I think we'll end on that note. Thank you everyone for braving tonight's warm, humid weather. I also wanted to do a huge shout out to Alex and Ursula, who are the editors of Flux.
Yes.
They've also been responsible for helping us organise this event. There are books for sale, but also support resources at the table behind you. There's also a few drinks while we're packing up. But could I please ask everyone to give a huge applause to the amazing panellists tonight, Sasja, Tiff, Madison and Nick.